All right, let's jump right in. We're going to travel back in time to the 1920s to meet this really mysterious group from Italy. They called themselves the Group. Now, these guys weren't just your typical philosophers sitting around talking. No, they were building something they saw as a practical science, a method for completely changing human consciousness, and by doing that, changing reality itself. So let's take a journey into their world and see what they were all about.
So, the whole starting point for the Eurogroup was this really powerful idea. They looked at modern people and saw us as being trapped. But here's the twist. We're not trapped by a government or some outside force. We're trapped by our own minds, by the very way we see the world. Think about it. They believe that every single thought we have, every action we take, it just adds one more bar to this prison cell that we're building for ourselves without even knowing it. And that is the problem they wanted to solve. According to their writings, what we call being awake, our normal day-to-day life, is actually a kind of spiritual sleep. It's like we're sleepwalking. We get so wrapped up in the material world, what we can touch and see, that we become totally numb to anything deeper. It's like we're stuck in this really narrow, dense version of the world, a version that they believed was, well, basically an illusion.
So what happens when we're in that waking sleep? Well, the Group had a pretty stark answer. They argued that because we're obsessed with measuring everything, weighing it, analyzing it, we basically strip the world of all its magic, all its life. We take this vibrant, living universe and we freeze it, turn it into a cold, predictable machine. And in the process, we do the same thing to ourselves. We forget who we really are and what we're truly capable of.
But right from inside this prison, a kind of call to adventure went out. And this is where the Group comes in. They were the secret circle, right? A group of people who looked at this modern condition and said, nope, we're not doing this. They decided to challenge it, systematically. They came up with a path, a really tough discipline, designed to help you break free from those limits you put on yourself, so you could finally experience reality as it really is.
So, you're probably wondering, how exactly were they planning to break out of this prison? Well, they used a word that might throw you off: magic. But hold on, when they said magic, they weren't talking about pulling rabbits out of a hat or anything like that. For them, it was something they called practical metaphysics. A better way to think of it is like an inner science. Just as rigorous and methodical as physics, but instead of studying the outer world, it's all about studying and working with the deepest energies inside of you.
And yeah, they were super clear about what their science was not. This wasn't the trendy spiritualism that was popular back then, seances and things like that. It wasn't theosophy, it wasn't any of the other occult practices that they thought were, frankly, confused and inferior. No, their path was all about self-mastery, about spiritual ascension. It was a seriously demanding technique that was supposed to have real, concrete effects on the person practicing it.
Okay, so how does a journey like this even start? Well, it begins with a crack in the wall of that prison. A moment, a direct personal experience that proves to you that reality is not what you thought it was. Let's dig into a real account from one of the group's members. He wrote under the name Pietro Negri, and this is the story of his very first glimpse behind the curtain.
And what's so wild is where this happened. The setting couldn't be more ordinary. He wasn't in some ancient temple. He wasn't deep in meditation. He was just on a busy sidewalk in Florence, talking with a friend. And this part is absolutely key. He wasn't trying to have a mystical experience. It just happened. It crashed into his normal day and shattered.
And then, bam! In a single instant, everything changed. The way he saw the world, life, even himself, it was all completely transformed. He suddenly became aware that his true self wasn't his physical body. It wasn't material at all. It was like reality itself started to dissolve and then reform around this totally new center.
And this moment led to a total flip, a complete reversal of how we normally see things. I mean, usually you feel like your mind, your consciousness, is inside your body, right? Well, he experienced the exact opposite. He realized his body, and not just his body, but the entire universe, was actually contained inside his consciousness. A consciousness he felt as just a single abstract point with no dimensions.
So, this moment, that was what they called the first awakening. It was the proof. The direct, you can't deny it evidence that this solid, material world we think is so real is just one way of seeing things. It's the first real step out of the prison. But here's the thing. A quick glimpse isn't enough to stay free.
That first experience, it's like someone cracks open a door and you get a peek at what's on the other side. But actually walking through that door and living there,
That takes intense, disciplined work. And that's exactly what the UR group did. They laid out this incredibly rigorous training path to make that new way of seeing things permanent and stable.
Their path was really built on 4 main pillars. First up, you had to achieve inner silence. That means stopping that constant chatterbox in your head, the petty mind. Once you could do that, step 2 was gaining total mastery over your body, making it perfectly still, overcoming all those little involuntary twitches. Then, you channel that mastery into building an absolutely unshakable will. And finally, the 4th step was learning to use your imagination, but not for daydreaming. For them, it was a precision tool for tapping into those deeper levels of reality.
Now, the group also talked about 2 different ways to approach all this, what they called the humid way and the dry way. The humid way is what you might think of as the mystical path. It's all about devotion, love, surrendering to something outside of yourself, like God. But the UR group, they were all about the dry way, the magical path. This one is all about active self-mastery. The center of your being isn't out there somewhere. You forge it inside yourself. You don't reach out for power, you build an unshakable core of self first.
And this quote right here, it just perfectly sums up the whole attitude of the dry way. It's not about emotional wanting, or desperately yearning for something you don't have. It's the opposite. It's about a cold, persistent, absolute will. A force that you build and you direct. Totally free from the ups and downs of hope or fear.
Okay, so you go through all this. You do all this incredibly hard work. What's the payoff? What's the final result? Well, according to their texts, it's not just that you get a new perspective on things. The real goal is a complete metamorphosis, a total shift into a new kind of being, what they called the awakened man, or the Magus.
So what does it actually mean to be in this awakened state? Well, for starters, it means you have a subtle body that's totally separate from your physical one, and with that, you start to see the world differently. Not as a bunch of solid objects, but as a language, as symbols you can actually read. Your actions don't come from just reacting to things anymore. They flow directly from your own sovereign self. Basically, you stop being pushed around by fate, and you become a force that shapes fate.
And this is where they drew a really sharp line between this kind of internal power and the external power we get from technology. Think about it. Technological power, they argued, can be given to anyone. It doesn't matter who you are on the inside. But this magical power, it's an organic part of who you've become. It can't be separated from you. Technology lets you stay a normal human and just wield powerful tools. But this path, it demands you transform beyond the human condition itself.
And this leads us to their ultimate and honestly most radical claim. In their writings, the fully realized person, this awakened man, achieves a state that's beyond even the gods, beyond the cycles of the cosmos. They become the supreme absolute principle, a truly immortal being with literally no god above them, no higher authority, period.
Which leaves us with a pretty deep question to chew on, doesn't it? The whole path of the UR group suggests that if you radically change how you perceive the world, you actually change the world itself. So it really makes you wonder, where does your perception stop and reality begin? And what does it truly mean to be awake?